And thank you for coming on this warm day. Hopefully we'll get some rain here out of all of this. Hi, Barry. So welcome to you. Again, I was just announcing, if you haven't signed in with if you have your email address, we can put you on our list. If you prefer not, that's fine too. Okay, so just a couple of announcements to make. First of all, I'm delighted that we're here today. We will meet in 2 weeks, and that will be an opportunity for us to hear from two people who are professionals in the field. One is a retired licensed social worker, and she is setting up a private practice here in Green Valley for geriatric care. We're really happy to have some private social workers, private providers available for consultations. And the other works with Charter Hospice. And so they're going to talk next time in 2 weeks about some of the work that they're doing. So we'll get an opportunity to hear from some other sources as well. So I'm delighted about that. We are going to take the month of August off. And what I would invite you to do is to go to our website and look at any of the ones that you have missed on our website, which is umcgv.org, United Methodist Church of Green Valley.org. And on the website there's a list of different ministries. I think it's, if you pull down about the third item, it will then indicate that you click on that and it'll open up dementia, caring through dementia. So that will be that. The other website I mentioned in my email earlier is Loving Through Dementia. This is based on a church in Marietta, Georgia, and they have done just an amazing job with their work. Some wonderful resources, presenters, speakers, a whole variety of people. You get a little different perspective, but very, very, very good. So that's that. I'm delighted to tell you that we have been working with Pima Council on Aging, and we are establishing a partnership with them. And part of the partnership agreement will be that we will host Memory Cafe here at this facility. So we've been clearing that and feeling like that's going to be a great offering. We know that it's been successful at Posada Life or La Posada, but the challenge for people is that, first of all, a lot of people think of La Posada as being exclusive and not available for the general public. In fact, that is available to the public. The advantage of that program is that they also have their daycare program. So we have some real resources in our community. The other thing that we thought of as we talked about it, as a church, we can do some things that probably they would shy away from. So for example, music is a really important part of the Memory Cafe. It's a way of gathering people together, people with dementia, people without dementia, and experiencing some relationship time, socializing time. Well, the music, we can provide some music that will also have a religious content to it. So and we're working in cooperation with other churches in Green Valley on that, by the way. We did have a meeting a couple of weeks ago with representatives from Valley Presbyterian Church and from Desert Fields Lutheran Church. I've had a number of conversations with Shawneen from the Risen Savior Lutheran Church, and then we also had, of course, Gary and Pam Chambers from St. Francis Episcopal Church. So we're working together with churches and we'll be looking for volunteers, people that want to be a part of this, and we'll learn what that is. The training for that will be in October. So those are some things we're kind of developing. So anyway, yes, ma'am.
Can I just say a quick thing? Once a month, they have the Memory Cafe on Saturday, which will be tomorrow. And I've enjoyed going to that so much that I can afford an hour.
Thank you for that.
And it's wonderful.
Tomorrow's Friday.
Yeah, tonight, she means Saturday. Saturday at 2 o'clock at La Posada. It's this week, this Saturday. That's good. Thank you so much, Helen, for that.
It's so good. I mean, it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
It's, the Memory Cafe includes, again, lots of time for fun, entertainment, et cetera. Yeah, Miriam. It's 1 o'clock. Okay. Now I'm really glad you guys are doing this. So it's really good to have, yes, ma'am.
I'm interested, just curious, what is the Memory Cafe there?
It's basically a program about an hour long. It includes some,
Snacks.
you go ahead, Helen.
They have snacks, and
Turn around and say, talk to others.
they have snacks there, and they come with both the caregiver and the person, and sometimes it's two caregivers because they're a gentleman in a wheelchair. And we do all kinds of things, and if you tend to be goofy like I am, you could just join right in. We sing, we play games, we help them, they color, we played, what is that thing?
Bowling?
No. Cornhole. And even the guy with the wheelchair, we positioned him so he was
Yeah.
able to do that.
Yeah.
And it's a joy because at first they come in, I went in with two people that were brand new. They didn't know where it was. So I said, we'll learn together. And I sat with them. And it was really comforting to me to watch them. They came in like scared, deadpan, and we actually got smiles out of their face. And so it's great.
So it's a way of really providing some kind of green space. We
Right.
sometimes talk about green space, which is contrast to red space. Red space is when you get into the conflict and the harsh challenges of trying to work out issues. But what you want is a green space where people feel good. And caregiver and care receiver are people that then can have a good feeling from their experience. They had, I know a professional magician one time that came in, and that was very entertaining.
They have
Storytellers
Music.
and music. Music's a big part of
It's
it.
in the community luncheon place.
Yeah. Yeah. This is at La Posada in that, it used to be called Casa Community Services, and now it's called Posada Life Community Services. So, anyway, there you are. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give my little talk on can dementia be prevented. So now let me see if this thing works. Yes, it does. Even though I can't see it on the screen here, and you can see it there. So I'm fine. What I'm reporting to you is some of what I learned from a center called Wicking Center. It's with the University of Tasmania in Australia. They are dedicated not only to, they're primarily a research facility, but they also are very committed around public health issues. Australia, like United Kingdom, has a lot of public education that they're doing about dementia. They're very concerned about it for their country. They really want to find ways to help the general population. So the Wicking Center has done that. They also have these courses are free through them, and they're massive. They're called a massive online course. And you may have 500 people on the course that you go through and you walk, and it's all free. There's two courses that I've taken. One is called Understanding Dementia, which is the basic course. And then this one is called Preventing Dementia. I took the Understanding Dementia about a year ago. They're very good, very thorough, and you get some of the scientific perspective. And for some of us, that is kind of important. Let's talk about healthcare in the United States. We spend about $4 trillion, or about $12,000 per person in healthcare. That is double what other countries basically spend. So we know how to spend money on this. In Australia, in contrast, I think it's about $8,000 per person. Other countries have other ways of factoring it. But the question becomes, who does get the health care and what is the focus of the health care? The answer to that is that our focus tends to be on acute medical care and chronic medical care. As you can see from just the numbers, the money spent on preventative medical care is only about 3%. So one of the things that can be a learning, I think, from the pandemic that we went through is the importance of community and preventive care. And I think we all kind of got a little bit more comfortable, at least most of us did, with masks, which was sort of a new thing. When we started, it's like, who am I that I'm wearing a mask? But the more you recognize the challenges and really what COVID did to people really makes us aware of how important it is. So when we talk about preventative medicine, there's 3 levels of preventative medicine. And by the way, I'll send this PowerPoint out to everybody, so if you want to take notes, you can. But the first is primary prevention. You know, let's get it before it happens. Let's lessen the causes. And the smoking campaign in our country was one of the most successful efforts at preventative health care. Reducing smoking, and that was a major challenge. We all lived through that, I think. The whole thing about dealing with, you know, the lobby from the tobacco companies, all the other ways in which we had to fight about things like private space, and we became knowledgeable about how passive smoking, when we're in a room that's full of smoke, we all remember those things. So how those things get legislated, and it tends to be both a carrot and a stick. You have to encourage people and say to them, this is for your health if you quit smoking. It is much better for you. You will feel much better for years to come. And on the other hand, the other alternative is to say, you cannot smoke in a public space, in a restaurant. You remember that? All the restaurants used to be. When you go to other countries, and it's surprising, here there are people are, you know, pulling out the cigarettes and stuff. How many of you had to deal with smoking in your life? Had to figure out a way to quit? I did. When I was actually what happened is I started smoking in college, and then, of course, you know, went on to seminary and stuff, and there were a couple of times that I stopped during that whole period of time. Then I got married, and Donna would cough, you know, and I could not sleep. And I thought to myself, I've got to get some sleep. So I ended up quitting smoking, and I had quit for about 3 days. And I said, honey, have you noticed anything different? And she said, no, what's going on? I said, I haven't smoked for 3 days. So she didn't even realize it, but it was the best thing that happened. So I'm glad I married a woman who was, you know, had that problem. Smoke, you know, it's hard to change a habit though. That's a really deep habit. Smoking is, it really can get you. There's another one I would mention in this area would be seat belts. Another very successful campaign. You go to other countries and you realize a lot of other people in other countries do not wear seatbelts. In our country, it's mandatory by law, right? In most, I think, except in New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, you don't have to put your seatbelt on. But otherwise, you have to again have that carrot and stick. You have to have incentives for people to make a change, and at the same time, you have to also be willing to say this is really true. The secondary prevention has to do with screening, with mammograms, for example. And of course, a lot of emphasis on that with dementia. A lot of emphasis around, you got to get your screening, you got to do your memory tests and all that kind of stuff. The challenge with dementia is that it's not a simple thing to do. You can go through what the doctor does, which is a mental status thing, supposed to do, as required by Medicare. But I know my doctor does not do that very well. I mean, one doctor did pretty well, other doctors don't. They ignore it. And who wants to be diagnosed with dementia? I mean, how many of us want to be just honest about it, and how many of us want to try to cheat the system? I think that's the reality, that we end up sometimes undermining it, but as part of the process, it's important. Last time, Tom Becker was our speaker, and his wife had dementia. He cared for her for the 11 years after she started having symptoms until she passed away. And he said it took basically 6 years for them to get a diagnosis. He began to suspect that something was going on. It was a very slow onset, but it was after about 6 years when finally the doctor, neurologist, said, yes, you have symptoms consistent with dementia. That's the way he put it. Because how do you prove that somebody has dementia? Autopsy. Nobody seems to want to volunteer for the autopsy. And then the third is tertiary prevention, reducing the overall impact of the health concern. And one example is support groups. Support groups can really make a huge difference in how people feel, how they enter that, having a trusted friend, somebody that you can be with and have the opportunity to feel like you can let your stress out as a caregiver, but also, and that's important too, with like the adult daycare program. We have people, the adult daycare program over at La Posada. One of our church members told me, I take my husband there, and he absolutely loves it. Now, what Tom said to us last time, 3 weeks ago, he said, when we drove up there, and Diane said, why are we stopping here? And Tom said, we're having lunch with some friends. Well, he was actually dropping off at the adult daycare for the full day. So they went in there, and he said the best thing was the people were so welcoming, even before they walked in. They were so welcoming, so glad to see them there. And so he said that made the difference. And so Diane was accepting, she absolutely loved it, and she went to the adult daycare at Posada Life. Yes, ma'am.
It does cost to do that.
$75, yeah.
A day.
And you have, per day, and you need to make a reservation. And the veterans do have an advantage. They can get some funding for it. But yes, you're right, there is a cost. And that is a subsidized cost, by the way. It costs more than that for them to run the program. But they actually have donations and also some grant money that helps them to have that. But it's the only one in town. That's the other reality. Now, Julie, you at Prestige, you have your support group, and then if somebody's in the support group, they can go into the memory care. If there's a patient, if there's somebody with dementia,
Yes.
you'll accept them. Yeah.
Somebody, if, the caretaker wants to come to the support group, we'll take your loved one into our program
Yeah.
and watch them for
that period of
hour.
time. So
Mhm.
that's
And that's
a
no
really
charge.
generous thing. So
Yeah.
Julie is with Prestige here, which is down on our Abrego at Continental.
Jerry,
Yeah,
what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's?
Alzheimer's is one of the causes of dementia. There are really hundreds of causes of dementia. Parkinson's is one of them. Also, there's vascular dementia, which is a kind of mini strokes. This is what my mother had, where, she would just slip down a notch, and she'd stabilize, and then she'd slip down a notch, and she'd slip down. So it's it can be, depending on how long in between. And then there's also Lewy body dementia. So there are several different ways that dementia happens. Dementia is the overall syndrome, which is a collection of symptoms that include memory loss, loss of judgment or capacity to resolve issues and problems, spatial awareness. So for example, if people with dementia have difficult time pulling their car up for gas, they may run over yeah. So there are issues about, that's one part of it. Another part of it becomes behavioral. with dementia, typically there's a change in behavior. Sometimes it's quite radical. And then the final thing is the physical changes that take place, where a person will, towards the end, will need constant care.
My dad, he had Alzheimer's disease, and very similar to dementia.
Yeah, well, it is a dementia.
And it is.
Yeah, it is a dementia. It's
And,
one of the causes of
it
dementia.
got so bad, he burned back his wife.
Yeah, it can be real bad. So here, so what about dementia? We're talking about preventative medicine. The Wicking Center estimates that 40% of dementia can be dealt with strategies to prevent dementia. This is for the general population. This is what's tricky about preventative medicine. Preventative medicine is about the whole population. And so we as individuals may hope that, if we do these things, we won't get dementia. But the reality is, it's the big picture. So we have to look at that in different ways, and we'll have more slides about what are good strategies. And you got a handout on that too. I think everybody got a handout. So the overall motto is, what's good for your brain, what's good for your heart is good for your brain. That's the overall motto. So, and that's good news, that's bad news. Because how many of us are GBR members? How many of us use the gym 3 times a week? All right, we got a couple, 3 times a week. I mean, here it is, a facility that we've got, and there's a wonderful thing about Green Valley, as our musician, as our organist here at the church says, we moved to Green Valley for our health, not to die, but to live. Because there's lots of incentives for us to live. So what's good for the heart is good for the brain. That's the motto of this. So yesterday I was really lucky to hear the doctor, what's his last name? Morrow? Is it Morrow? Something like that. Yesterday. Domer. Okay, thank you. Says put the M in there first. Domer, Dr. Domer is a gerontologist, retired now in Tucson. I want to have him come down here and talk to us. He gave a whole presentation about aging and what normal aging is and all that stuff, and included in that a segment on the brain specifically that was very good. So I want to have him come and share that with us in the fall. But among other things, is he's talking about what is the natural aging process. Well, our brains began declining when we're 40. 3 to 5%, 15 to 20% lost by age 85. So, but the brain is very clever. The brain finds other ways of solving problems and making things happen. So it may be slower, it may take more time. We are easily distracted. So, it's a Thursday I guess it was about 3 months ago, and I've done some other things in the morning. I've been up in Tucson. I was taking my sister to a doctor up there. I came back. I had my wife's car, which I don't usually drive. I'm coming down up the freeway to Esperanza, and I looked to the left and I thought, it is so nice we don't have winter people here because there's so little traffic. And I pulled out and took a left, ran into a car that was coming on Esperanza. So, and the woman was so nice. I mean, fortunately, it was just, I didn't damage her car very much. I did a couple thousand for our car. But, I said, I'm so sorry about this. I'm headed up to my church. We're doing something on dementia. I think she was real sweet, but I think she probably wondered what I was doing about it. But that's when I thought, I'm distracted. My mind was I think I looked to the right, but I don't remember. But, so how do we keep, some focus as we age? How do we learn the tricks? And the doctor yesterday was talking about, for example, just writing things down. That whole thing about, well, I'm driving, I can't do that. But I can verbalize some things. And sometimes for me to verbalize it to Donna, my wife, and to say, Donna, this and that. And we now have an agreement that she will tell me if there's something I'm doing in terms of driving that I shouldn't be doing. I always get defensive about it. That's called defensive driving, being defensive. When your wife tells you what you're doing wrong. Pardon me?
Do you have dementia?
No, I don't have dementia. Not yet. Processing information, these are normal aging processes. Processing information takes longer. So, and there's a number of things that we know about that. And I just know, I'm watching the news and sometimes they speak so quickly. We love some of these news programs. Boy, they just speed through it. And it's partly just hearing it, but it's also partly just being able to digest what is being said. So it's just slower. It takes more time to imprint memories, and we'll say a little bit more about how that happens. The doctor talked about that yesterday too, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. The good news is that we're better able to discern what's important, and that's called wisdom. And I really do think that's true. But on the other hand, everybody gets old, but not everybody gets wise. Okay, so here are what they identify as the 7 risk factors for dementia. Now, again, you'll have a copy of all of this. Diabetes, physical inactivity, low education. This one's hard for me to think about because it really has to do with the education that you got when you were younger. And what they've done with their studies is that if people who only have, say, primary education, elementary education, and how, percentage-wise, how much more likely they are to have dementia than people who have higher education. So why is that, do you think? Why would that be true? Doesn't seem fair, for one thing. But why would that be true?
It would create a lot of frustration.
For people with less education, it's more frustrating?
Mhm.
Yeah. And, Jan?
Well, I think their minds haven't been,
Stimulated.
Stimulated or challenged?
to challenge and to go on.
Uh-huh. I think that's part of it, and also just thinking about the vocations that they would have, the vocations would less likely be ones in which they had to use their mind a lot. It tends to be that the more education you get, the more you're faced with trying to solve problems or deal with issues, and lesser education, your work may be, much more routine. You may physically be in better shape, on the other hand, so maybe that offsets some of it, but that is one that I had some difficulty just accepting. Hypertension, they talk about that particularly when it's diagnosed in midlife. I think it's more common in older life, but in midlife, depression is also a key. And we talked about that a little bit yesterday, the doctor did, about depression and the link to dementia. And sometimes you can't tell if somebody has dementia or if they're depressed. They may act out in the same way, so similar way, it depends. But depression is something, these are things that are important for us to treat, right? If somebody is depressed, it's important to work with them. Smoking also, partly because of the way it impacts lung capacity, obesity in midlife. They also talk about hearing factors, and Steve, you and I have talked about that, and social isolation. And those two often link together. If you have a hearing loss, you often have to you don't have as good a chance to interact with people. I have a hearing loss. I've had hearing aids for 15 years. My father was severely hard of hearing. We'd go to a restaurant and he would be quiet the whole time, couldn't talk because he couldn't hear. Didn't know if he'd say something that would be stupid and considered stupid and out of place. So lots of
Have they found
impact.
that it's hereditary?
Hearing loss?
No. Dementia.
Next question. Thank you. So most dementia is not genetic. They say the exception is when it's a younger onset, which would be early diagnosis. Lewy body dementia comes early in life, and some of the other things. But for the most part, only 1% is what they said. And there's one particular protein that they've identified, APOE-A4 is the protein. I think that's what it is. That protein, if you have that protein, you are much more likely to get dementia. That's one genetic connection they've made, but they're, for the most part, they have not been able to identify genetic connections. So. Okay, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. Physical activity, they say 150 minutes per week, moderate aerobic activity, strength training. If you drink moderate alcohol. Now, in Australia, they said, well, 5 drinks a week, maybe 10 drinks a week, they said. And then my cardiologist said 2 drinks a week. So I had to put his recommendation down. If you drink moderately. Social engagement demands cognitive activities, so that's a good thing. It can be rewarding. You can be an entertainer. You can tell jokes, and you can listen to people, and you can feel good. So. And they had a suggestion that you start a new pastime in retirement. So, something that you haven't done that may be a new way. My wife started mahjong, so that's where she is every Thursday afternoon. So she misses these times together. Also, to get plenty of rest. And sleep is not easy as we get older. We have a variety of ways that we're interrupted. And then again, the doctor yesterday identified the sleeping patterns of older people compared to the young people. It's dramatically different. And how many times we wake up during the night, we don't even realize we wake up. And of course, other times we wake up because we gotta go pee. And depression, if you're depressed, tell somebody about it. Find a way to work it out. I find that when I began to move in that direction, I have to remind myself of a number of things. Being a child of God for one thing, but also moving my body, physical activity. How long has it been since I've felt an affirmation from anybody? And I can go and ask for that. Donna, tell me something good about me. Hopefully you have people that can be affirming to you. So it's really important to engage. And then engage in regular mental activity. By the way, what is the best mental activity is learning a new language, they say. Isn't that scary? We're all groaning about that one. And the reason they think that's, and I'm not doing it. I mean, I'm just telling you the news. I'm telling you what they're talking about. But the reason they think it's good is because if you learn just even a few words, the opportunity you have to use a few words or to say a few things, especially in this context, the Spanish. I mean, there is some sense of recognition or some sense of validation. Hey, isn't this good? I remembered this couple of words. Border Community Alliance has this Spanish conversation thing, and they do it through Zoom, and people have a lot of fun learning Spanish together as a small group, because they have, among other things, they show these cartoons, or not cartoons, they're actually sitcoms of this American guy that shows up and he ends up with, 3 friends who speak Spanish. He thinks he can speak Spanish. He has the absolute worst accent of anybody. I mean, I don't know Spanish, but you can just tell he's terrible. And they watch that because it's so much fun, because everybody knows, I can do better than that. So that's the advantage of it. So again, some value in learning a new language. What other kinds of mental activity do you think would be challenging, would be helpful? What other things would you think of? Pardon me?
A new musical instrument.
A new one?
Learning a musical instrument.
Learning a new, beautiful, that's wonderful. That does about 3 things, doesn't it? Learn the music and all that, yeah, Barry.
Doing crossword puzzles.
Yes, except that crossword puzzles can become very routine. People can become very, very good at them. And they end up having a diminishing effect over a period of time. So learning a different thing like Wordle, for example, or some other game, continuing to change games may help. Yeah, somebody else over
I
here.
try to read challenging books,
Challenging books.
nonfiction.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But they're really interesting, the ones I've come across, they're really good.
They're very interesting. Classes, OLLI classes, GBR classes. I don't know, GBR doesn't have a lot focused that way, but the OLLI classes, online learning classes, are really excellent. And oftentimes you can find these people who really are focused on a specific area. Like a friend of mine does astro photography. So, go into a class and learn about astrophysics or photography. Amazing stuff. What else? Anything else for mental activity? Yeah.
How about Sudoku? How's that?
About what?
Sudoku? Anything about Sudoku?
Sudoku,
My
yeah.
wife does Sudoku all the time.
What is that? Yeah.
That's numbers.
So let's talk a little bit about these. I'm surprised nobody's said anything about these new meds yet. Well, I think we've already, the doctor that spoke to us back in January made it pretty clear that a lot of the new meds, there's so much hype on them, and yet the benefits are so limited. They're saying that these 2 new meds, the one that just got approved, would be $26,000 a year. Medicare says we'll pay 80%, but that still leaves you a chunk, and then you have to have some additional testing to go with it, so that the evaluations themselves ramp up the cost per year for $4,000. And the benefits are delay of symptoms on the average for 5 months. Wow. And there's a significant risk of a stroke. 40% of the people that were on the sample had bleeding and swelling in the brain. So the question becomes, is this really the way we want to go with this? And for some of us, for me, thinking about how much money will go into that from Big Pharma, just thinking that there would be so many better ways that this money could be spent in regard to this incentive. So, it's a lot. One more question, that's it. This is the last one.
Okay, I'll keep it short. This is one advertised on TV called Predigen.
What's that?
Predigen?
Predigen.
Yeah. No?
Thumbs down on that. This is the crowd. I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell
He
you.
said no. They asked him that yesterday, he said no.
Yeah.
He said what usually happens is, it's the caregiver that thinks they're getting better. It's almost like a placebo for the caregiver. But there is no real measurable.
And that's not bad that the caregiver feels better.
Well, I know.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing, but yeah. So there's a concept that they gave in this thing called cognitive reserve, which is prolonged mental engagement, creating a reserve within us. And that's this thing about reading a hard book. Somebody talked about that, or taking a class and really feeling stretched, by something that. You create the capacity for resilience, improved quality of the neural network, and you also have neural flexibility, allowing you to find new ways to solve problems. My brother-in-law has, he's been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, but I think he has dementia. But what's interesting about him is that he is such a creative person. He really can find other ways of solving problems. And so that capacity really indicates a certain resilience. He's an artist, among other things, although he was trained as an engineer. He actually helped to design, if any of you have been in the Titan missile silo thing, he actually helped to design that whatever they call it, the disc with all the instruments and stuff. And he said it was so top secret when they did it that he never seen the whole thing. They were never allowed to see the whole thing. He just had to work on one little part. But he's an interesting guy, and I think, the mental capacities that we have to move from different, range of ideas and feelings and things is really an important thing. To go from being a musician to being an electrical engineer or whatever.
I'll vote for that.
So the Wiki Center does do stuff with regard to what does not work. And these are things that have been recommended to them: coconut oil, ginkgo biloba, or however you pronounce that.
Ginkgo biloba.
And then vitamin 12, B12, D, and antioxidants. So they've kind of indicated that those are not. And the doctor yesterday also was talking about supplements and saying supplements do one thing really, really well. They've had the pockets of the people that take that manufacture them, right? So whatever. And yesterday, one of the guests there was also with hospice, and she talked about how many meds they will basically take people off of, supplements and other things, because we don't need as much. This is what the doctor said. We don't need as much medicine as we age. So you may be on, say, 20 milligrams now, and maybe you only need 10 as you get older because your system is different. So, and we keep getting the same amount. So things that might work, these are things that what I just showed you are things that don't work. Things that might work include brain training. There's a lot about that now, about going on the internet and you find something that's going to challenge you and twist you and everything. They found that it's if you do it at home alone, it's not all that beneficial. Where it's helpful is if you get a coach to work with you, if you get somebody else to work with you. So that's an interesting thing. I don't know enough about that to say much more, but probably if we went on brain teasers, I don't know, you could do Google search and you could probably find all kinds of things like that. So the goal of brain training, and this is more in relationship to the overall way in which memory is formed. The doctor was describing it. We get our memories from the senses that we have. They go through the hippocampus, and they're formulated there, and then they're sent to all different parts of the brain. It's really fascinating. So you look at this brain, and here's that little hypothalamus. I said hippocampus, but hypothalamus. And just a little teeny thing in there, but that's what processes it. And then it'll go all over. The memories will go all over. So the brain's so incredibly complex, and we're learning so much more about it, aren't we? But what's also interesting is when we think about memory will be triggered by things other than just simply thinking about it, right?
I need to read a better book. Just call it.
That'll be your challenge for next time.
Oh, thank you.
So for example, if I smell somebody smoking a cigarette outside, I'll think of my father. 'Cause my father smoked, and we would go hunting, and he would smoke and he would smoke. I mean, he would hunt and he would smoke. And so that whiff of smoke would remind me. So the memories are triggered by things like, smells, tastes, touches, images, music, all these things. And that's different parts of the brain that are affected. So one of the interesting things is how we can, that's part of the reason why music is so powerful, because it's in so many different parts of the brain, and it kind of pulls it all together. You've got words. I mean, I can remember words of poems that basically we used in Psalms, right, to sing, but I wouldn't otherwise be able to remember those. So just awareness of that. This is one of the most encouraging things that's came out of this whole thing, is something from Finland that stands for Finnish Geriatric Intervention Studies. So it came out of Finland, and they did a huge study with a large population. And what's so significant about it is the clinical trial was done with older people. So it was like 55 to 75. And what they found is that there was a significant improvement in cognitive functioning and other mental capacities, like 25% improvement. And they were in this program to do this, so it wasn't that people were just left alone to say, hey, why don't you go down to the gym, but it was a program that they went through. And there was the control group and then the group that participated in it, a 25% improvement for a population that's older. That's really significant. And I think we need to do more with this. We need to do more with preventing dementia. We need to do more with that, especially in Green Valley, especially with something like the fingers thing. This is now being replicated in North Carolina. It was done originally in Finland, but now it's being done in North Carolina and some other places. So some more information coming out about that.
Why did they stop at 75? You don't work after 75?
Well, that was the study. That's the focus. The focus group is 55 to 70. But it doesn't mean that it wouldn't have some effect for people at any age. Yeah, good point. So can dementia be prevented? Well, not totally. We know that. Not for every individual. But the incidence of dementia, the percentage of people afflicted, can be dramatically reduced with preventive measures. The result would be less suffering for millions of families and huge savings on health care for other services. Total spending in the U.S. for dementia care in 2022 is $345 billion, up from $109 billion 10 years ago.
That's a lot of money.
So that's huge, huge increase. Lifetime care for a person with dementia, $390,000.
So is that care in a place, in a home?
This is the average apparently, that would be lifetime. It may or may not be in a home, it may be home care. And that would be an average, so some people would do much less than that, spend much less, especially if they're able to keep the person, their loved one in their home. But, there's always going to be some costs related to it, whether it's doctors or, for example, one of our speakers, Linda Laird, had taken care of her husband all the way through until he died. But the only way she survived was to have a caregiver come in into her home. She also took him to La Posada a number of times for the adult daycare program. and she went on lots of quilting trips. She said, I would tell my husband, I've got another quilting event that I want to go to in California. Well, she would take off and go to California, but she would just relax the whole time. But she always told him that, she was going off on a quilting trip. So that's the answer to that question. And again, that's per person. The estimated dementia cost in 2015, $1.6 trillion. So again, how much more is that from now? That's almost unbelievable to think of. Okay, so that's the end of the program. Are there questions or comments people want to make at this point? Yes, ma'am.
There's a medicine called, see, I think I Intratropine, and they give it to a lot of people that have Parkinson's to keep them from shaking. And that side effects, if you look that up, the side effects are symptoms of dementia.
Yeah, and dementia, Parkinson's is one of the causes of dementia. Not everybody that has Parkinson's gets dementia.
Right.
50% or so, something like that.
Is anger one of the symptoms of people with dementia?
Yeah, behavioral response is oftentimes anger, and sometimes it's in phases. The two people that spoke to us about their own experience caring for a loved one both talk about the experience of anger with their loved one. For Tom, who was the one that spoke 3 weeks ago, he said that Diane went through that phase for a period of time where she really didn't believe that she had dementia, and she was angry with him when he would correct her, one thing or the other. And that went on for a significant period of time. And then she became quite mellow. Eventually she accepted it.
Do they suggest that you tell people that they have dementia or not?
Good question. Yeah. That would be a good one for next time. And I would say a lot of that would depend on who and how. I was interested. Pardon me?
Offset did it this way, had discussions and had an agreement as to when you tell people and who you tell. And he let it up to her.
Say it again.
I said Tom.
Tom.
His wife and him had an agreement as to when it was disclosed and when it wasn't and to whom. And she
Oh,
made a lot of
tell
sense.
others, you mean? Yeah, but not necessarily with her. They had gone to the neurologist together, and that's when the neurologist said, you have symptoms consistent with
But
Alzheimer's.
they didn't tell their friends.
And how they dealt with their friends, and I wasn't sure if is that what your question is about telling
I
others?
have somebody that I was taking to the adult daycare,
Yeah.
and he hated it.
Uh-huh.
And he was angry,
Right,
angry to go, angry when I picked him up, so I finally just quit. But
yeah.
I've never told him you have dementia.
Yeah.
I've never said.
And your role is as caregiver?
Oh, I'm a good friend.
Good friend.
He's my roommate, yeah. And,
Yeah.
he's 88,
Yeah,
and he's angry.
yeah.
He's really aware that he can't do very well.
I can appreciate the idea of being angry. That's it. That would be a good thing to share with a counselor perhaps. Yeah, talk it through and see how to do that and whether to do it.
Physically violent. Sometimes they get
Oh, no, he's not violent.
Sometimes they get violent.
I think it also depends.
Yeah.
Dementia is so individualized, they say if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person
One
with
person
dementia.
with dementia,
Everybody's so
yeah.
different. So I think that, to answer that question, is just going to be depending on your person,
Yeah,
as to whether or not you think you should tell them.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I haven't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one. This is a really hard conversation, and, different families, this is why, we rely on doctors a lot to help us with this. And, but one person I know was really hoping the doctor would say, tell my husband not to drive. She wanted him to say that, the doctor. Well, she didn't let him know ahead of time. She didn't tell the doctor ahead of time. She just wanted him, and the reality is, doctors are really reluctant to do that sometimes. I mean, I think Tom said he went to 6 neurologists before this one said, you have symptoms consistent with Alzheimer's. But doctors don't always want to be out front with that. Yeah, ma'am.
They told me with my mother, don't correct,
Don't
because
correct.
that causes more frustration.
Yeah, there could be then that's that red zone versus green zone. The red zone where you can get into constant conflict, and the green zone where you can have good vibes, good feelings, that kind of thing. Somebody else had another question over here. Okay. All right, well, thanks so much. We're at 3 o'clock, or no, 4 o'clock.
So Jerry, when's the next one? 2 weeks?
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today, 27?
Yeah, right,
27?
27, yeah.
You're in Hawaiian time?